Shalom. Thanks for joining me. Deuteronomy chapter 16. This is where we are. Again, remember, this is Moses repeating all the laws, repeating all the history of God with Israel, because these are his final moments on earth. Because after he finishes this, he is going to climb Mount Pisgah, and there he is going to die. And then Joshua is going to take his place as leader and cross over the Jordan River, going westward, and they're going to begin the conquering of the land. So here we are on the plains of Moab on the eastern side of the Jordan, and Moses is speaking. Let's join Moses in what he's saying. You ready? Observe the month of Aviv, and keep Pesach to Adonai your God. For in the month of Aviv, Adonai your God brought you out of Egypt at night. You ought to sacrifice the Pesach offering from God and herd to Adonai your God in the place where Adonai will choose to have his name live. By the way, Pesach means Passover, because it comes from the phrase that God told the Israelites in the book of Exodus, that when I see the blood of the lamb on the doorpost of your house, I will pass over that house. Passover is Pesach. So you're going to celebrate the festival of Pesach, the festival of Passover. Verse 3, you are not to eat any chametz. You're not to eat any chametz with it. For 7 days you are to eat it with matzah. Chametz is bread with leaven. Matzah is bread without leaven, unleavened bread. The bread of affliction. Matzah is called the bread of affliction. For you came out of the land of Egypt in haste. Thus you will remember the day you left the land of Egypt as long as you live. No leaven, that's yeast, by the way. No leaven is to be seen with you anywhere in your territory for 7 days. None of the meat from your sacrifice on the first day of the evening is to remain all night until morning. You may not sacrifice the Pesach offering in just any of the towns that Adonai your God has given you, but at the place where Adonai your God will choose to have his name live. There is where you are to sacrifice the Pesach offering in the evening when the sun sets at the time of year that you came out of Egypt. You are to roast it and eat it in the place Adonai your God will choose. In the morning you will return and go to your tents. For 6 days you are to eat matzah, and on the 7th day there is to be a festive assembly for Adonai your God, and do not do any kind of work. You are to count 7 weeks. You are to begin counting 7 weeks from the time you first put your sickle to the standing grain. You are to observe the festival of Shavuot, that's the festival of weeks, for Adonai your God, with a voluntary offering, which you are to give in accordance with the degree to which Adonai your God has prospered you. You are to rejoice in the presence of Adonai your God, you, your sons and daughters, your male and female slaves, the Levim, the Levites, living in your towns, and the foreigners, orphans, and widows living among you, in the place where Adonai your God will choose to have his name live. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt. Then you will keep and obey these laws. Now it's interesting. He talks about having the celebration of Pesach, which is 7 days, and on the 8th day, there's that last gathering, the 7th day rather, is that gathering. And then you count 7 weeks. In Jewish culture today, that is called counting the Omer, O-M-E-R, counting the Omer. So after Passover, they count the Omer. That's the next 7 weeks, and that's what Shavuot is. And then you observe the festival of weeks, Shavuot. Interestingly enough, that celebrates today God giving the law to Moses on Mount Sinai. And that is today what we call Pentecost, which celebrates today that the Lord gave the Holy Spirit. So the giving of the law and the giving of the Holy Spirit are what we call Pentecost today, or Shavuot, or the Festival of Weeks. How about that? They're all one and the same. So, and notice, by the way, you're to do this wherever I put my name. That means wherever the tabernacle is, that's where I put my name. So you go to that place, and that's where you sacrifice the Pesach, the Passover lamb, okay? And then, by the way, you have to always be mindful. You were a slave in Egypt, and this represents God setting you free from slavery. Never forget what you came from, okay? And then he starts in verse 13. You're to keep the festival of Sukkot. for 7 days after you have gathered the produce of your threshing floor and winepress. Sukkot is the festival of temples, or the festival of tabernacles, or tents, or shelters, also known as the festival of booths. It is typically celebrated sometime in October, normally, depending on the calendar. So there's this taking place in the spring, which is the Pishak and the Shavut, and then later in the fall is the festival of booths, the festival of tabernacles, the festival called Sukkot, which, by the way, just recently ended here. Today is October 16th. It just ended just last week. But it says, for 7 days you've gathered the produce of your threshing floor and winepress. So this is after all the crops have grown, and now you have harvested everything. Okay, and now you're going to celebrate living in little shelters, little booths. Okay, so you're celebrating that you had this ingathering, the festival of ingathering. He says, rejoice at your festival. You, your sons, your daughters, your male, your female slaves, the Levim, and the foreigners, the orphans, and the widows living among you. 7 days you are to keep the festival for Adonai your God, in the place Adonai your God will choose, because Adonai your God will bless you in all your crops and in all your work, so you are to be full of joy. This is a happy occasion. Okay, this is fun. You're supposed to enjoy this moment. 3 times a year, all your men are to appear in the presence of Adonai your God in the place he will choose. At the festival of Matzah, at the festival of Shavut, at the festival of Sukkot. They are not to show up before Adonai empty-handed, but every man is to give what he can in accordance with the blessing Adonai your God has given you. You are to appoint, now it shifts gears a little bit. By the way, notice you're never to appear before God empty-handed. That's an important principle. How about us Christians today? We go to church. What does it mean to go to church empty-handed? Well, if you're not there to actually worship God, and if you're not there for the gratitude for all he has done for you this past week, maybe you're going there empty-handed. Well, what if I give a monetary offering? That's good. You should. Yeah. But what if in your heart you're really not grateful? You're just showing up because it's a social event. Maybe that means you're going to God empty-handed. Think about that. Verse 18, shifting gears a little bit. You're to appoint judges and officers for all your gates in the cities Adonai your God is giving you, tribe by tribe, and they are to judge the people with righteous judgment. You are not to distort justice or show favoritism, and you are not to accept a bribe, for a gift blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of even the upright. Justice, only justice, you must pursue, so that you will live and inherit the land Adonai your God is giving you. Now, this is very fascinating because this is about the judicial system. It's supposed to be, not show favoritism, not distort justice. You're to be completely neutral as a judge. And by the way, notice where they sit. They sit in the gates of the cities. That's where the courts were in these ancient cities, in these ancient Israelite cities. The gates of the cities generally had 2 to 3 gates, depending on the size of the city. Some of them only had 1. But there were these built into the gate complex was a series of rooms, some bigger than others. And this is where taxes were paid. Fees were paid to enter the city. Fees were paid to leave the city. You paid taxes on your goods, coming and going. Yeah, taxes are nothing new. But this is also where the land office would be. So if you bought real estate and you wanted contracts for that, this is where the contracts would be. This is where you would seal those deals. Any kind of business deal that needed legal documentation that was done at the gates of the city in these different rooms. And this is also where the judges of the city, yes, the civil judges, criminal judges, and even the religious judges would sit here. And this is where you this is where you went to court. And this is where you presented your cases. So that's what they're talking about here. Verse 21, 22, the very tail end. You're not to plant any sort of tree as a sacred pole besides the altar of Adonai, your God, that you will make for yourselves. Likewise, do not set up a standing stone Adonai your God hates such things. So two forms of ancient worship that these other cultures did was they worship what's called Ashtoreth, and typically that involved a wooden pole, and oftentimes that was done under a shady tree, up on a high place. And typically that act of worship was a sexual act of worship. Now imagine you're up there on a hilltop and everybody can watch and see, and that act of sex was also an act of worship, or whatever form that sex took. There's no one really quite knows what that wooden pole was, but that's called an Asherah pole. Some people think it was a phallic symbol. That is, in other words, it looked like a giant male member. And then there's also the standing stones. To stand up a stone of any size, a small stone like 2 feet tall, or a large stone, 6, 8, 10 feet, 12 feet tall. These standing stones would be places where people worshiped around them. There might be carvings on these stones for different deities or different acts of worship, different things that they would do, or different sayings or praises to this deity or whatever it was. So what God is telling them is, you have to stop this cultural practice. You don't worship me like these other people worship their gods, no matter how attractive it is, no matter how common it is. You come to the place where I put my name. That's where you worship me. You don't worship me like the other people used to do. So here's God changing and altering culture.